Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast. Now, a company called Severalnines are a self-funded, and in the last few years, they've built their credibility around open source database operations. And as a result of their values-driven approach in building products that deliver those wow moments to their customers, they set off my tech spidey sensors. So I invited them on the podcast today to talk about how most data sovereignty discussions usually centre around data residency because organisations are hyper-focused on compliance, and consequently most cannot truly appreciate how data sovereignty actually relates to their data stack. But so there's so much I want to talk about today. So I've invited Vinay onto the podcast to talk about all this, the story behind Severalnines, and much more. So buckle up and hold on tight, because no matter where you're listening in the world, it's time for me to beam your ears all the way stateside to find out all about Severalnines and the problems that they're solving with technology. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm the CEO of Severalnines, a Swedish-based software company. And that's Severalnines as in 5 nines, 6 nines, 99.999%, right? So,
yeah.
Anybody who spent time in, for example, telco, will know the obsession of the telco industry to be, to have as many nines as possible. So, we build database orchestration software for enterprises, and we tend to do it reliably. We have a background in databases. So I have been in, personally in the database market for 20 years, 10 of which was spent at MySQL. And a big part of the work there was helping, enterprises sort of manage and automate highly available database clusters. So this problem, it was ubiquitous, and there weren't ready-made solutions, right? So that's why we formed Severalnines, and today we have a bit more than 200 enterprise customers and a community of thousands of users of our freemium software. So
fantastic. And just to set the scene for today's conversation together, can you tell me more about data sovereignty and also how discussions typically centre around data residency, because organisations are so hyper-focused on compliance right now, because it is such a big topic, isn't it?
Yes, and this isn't surprising because we are having this conversation as a result of the GDPR, which brought the digital sovereignty principle and its offspring, right, data sovereignty, into the public consciousness. And it makes sense because there is a lot of complexity and potential cost involved, right? And that's due to legislation, international agreements, over-reliance on a handful of providers, enormous fines even, right? I mean, sometimes when I speak to my American colleagues, they don't seem to take that GDPR thing very seriously. But hey, Amazon got fined 746 million euros last year. Google Ireland was fined 90 million euros early this year, right? So we have seen some pretty hefty fines, and there are a lot of companies in the EU still operating in sort of violation of the GDPR, right? And they don't know if and when they're going to get fined or how much, right? So when you've got a lot of uncertainty and risk around legislative compliance, the jurisdiction of which is international, you don't have a lot of choice, right, to mitigate that risk. It is significant. And now a huge part of the world's IT infrastructure runs on US-owned, right, hyperscalers. So the consequences are far-reaching, especially after Schrems 2, right, which invalidated the former privacy shield between the US and the EU. And frankly, after that, many have been caught flat-footed and are now gambling on that another agreement will be made, right? So it is an opportunity for a rethink, I believe, and to mitigate its attendant risks. And, anybody who's been in the IT industry know that, more regulation is a foregone conclusion, right, in tech. So it's better to prepare now and create a structure to manage legal processes later, right, by being in control of your data and your software stacks.
100% with you on that. And of course, as a result, most cannot truly appreciate how data sovereignty actually relates to their data stack. But for an organization, true data sovereignty is actually an extension of sovereignty over its stack, which might blow a few people's minds just saying that there. But can you expand on that?
Yes. So data sovereignty, it's actually an outcome of possessing sovereignty over your own data stack, right? But then what are the means? So in its simplest expression, a data stack is the infrastructure, right? You think servers, the databases operating on top of it, the tooling around them, right? So it naturally follows that if you don't have sovereignty or some measure of control over your stack, then you can truly have data sovereignty, right? So this is probably why you hear infrastructure providers like Google co-opting the term digital sovereignty, right? Which is data sovereignty's precursor. And this is good because it means that organizations and people, they are starting to talk about the means of data sovereignty, and they're starting to think more holistically, right? Then you have others like VMware and their sovereign cloud initiative, right, which gets closer to the means discussion, but it still focuses heavily on compliance. So ultimately, this is why we are talking about sovereign DBaaS, because you're conceptualizing the entire stack when talking DBaaS, right? The infrastructure, the operating system, the databases, and the tooling around them.
Can you also expand on how stack sovereignty is a function of control, which is a function of awareness and ability to affect change? Because again, so important right now, isn't it?
Yes. And, sovereignty is a beautiful term, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially, I know you are in the UK and, Brexit, it's about taking back control back from the EU.
Oh, it's too soon to bring that up.
Okay. So, yeah. And, so sovereignty, it's a term which, the use is typically reserved for nation states, right? And that makes sense historically. But when you look at the definition of sovereignty, one is the state of having supreme power or authority, right? And you can have that over anything. So that is why you can talk about digital data sovereignty, individual sovereignty, sovereign identity. Because when we're thinking about having supreme power or authority, then the question is, what is this power or authority predicated on, right?
Yeah.
So you need to be aware. That is, you need to have visibility, and then you need to be able to effect change, right? Which means you need to be able to do something, right? So in the current cloud database landscape, although shifting, right, it doesn't provide that. We see that enterprises are using public DBaaS services, but they have no control, right? They've really relinquished it to the hyperscalers, right? It's an opaque operating model, right? What goes on behind all these nice cloud services, it's not something that, that this sort of enterprise would have access to. So if you have a problem, then you have no visibility into the lower layers, right? Which means you don't have the ability to fix anything, right? And that's not to mention the visibility into costs and the ability to predict your monthly cloud bill. So, all in all, all this sort of breeds dependence, right? Which is why we developed the sovereign DBaaS concept.
And I'm curious, does that mean that heavy users of public clouds and their services, example like DBaaS, are not truly sovereign, or is it a non-binary proposition?
Right. So, by definition, sovereignty is a binary proposition, right? But practically it's not. Think about in the Middle Ages, right? If you were king of the hill, you had a certain kingdom, you could do pretty much anything you want, right?
Yeah.
But today, every country, organization, or individual operates within a larger structure, right? So even though Sweden, for example, the Kingdom of Sweden, it's a sovereign state, but it operates within the EU, for example, right? But if you think about placing the object that you're looking to measure sovereignty over on an independence continuum, right? Yeah. So on one pole, you have dependent. On the opposite, you have independent, right? So we could say, for example, that heavy users of public clouds and services, right, they lean more towards the dependence end of the continuum. And of course, you can chop that up, however you want. So for example, somebody solely using AWS and its services, they can be said to be on the extreme end of the continuum, right? Someone using multiple clouds and their services is a little less so, right? And so on and so forth. And likewise, if you're running your own servers, your own databases, you have your own tooling, then, you can say you're on the extreme opposite end of the spectrum, right? And if you're using a colocation provider where you're maybe renting some hardware, a little less sort of independent and so forth. And, the point is that neither end is preferable or frankly possible, and that's okay, right? But I think in general, you should aim at possessing as much sovereignty as it makes sense, and more so than is needed at any one point, because needs can change.
And bearing in mind everything we're talking about here, what are the biggest risks that you see here for businesses?
Right. So when we're talking about, data stack sovereignty, right?
Yeah.
We're looking at mitigating a bunch of, of risks. And the first one is vendor lock-in. So, we've all heard that, right? We all understand what's going on here in a way, right? Large companies exerting way too much power over how how you do business, and things like that. So vendor locking is a main one. Then you have environmental lock-in, right? So which is very similar to vendor lock-in. So here, let me give you an example. Any company who started in the last 10 years, they probably stated, they probably started operations in the cloud, right? And we call them cloud native. And each cloud provider, they have a cloud environment, right, with services that are usually specific to that provider. So after you've been running there for a number of years, you are locked into that cloud environment, right? Because there is no other environment that will suit you or even have access to these services you've been depending on, right? So, and the other one is, key person dependency, right? That's, when somebody important leaves the organization and suddenly you start seeing problems popping up in different parts of the infrastructure, right? Then that, that person was like, probably you don't realize how dependent you are really on that person. If you're in the software industry, one important thing is open source license instability, right? So we saw a couple of years ago that, many database vendors started changing their licensing from open source to sort of source available, right? So, let me give you an example. If you're using, Amazon Elasticsearch service, right, you would have noticed that it is now called Amazon OpenSearch service, right? That was written about a year ago. So Elastic changed their license, and thereby they were forbidding AWS from offering it as a service, right? And other companies also have changed their licenses: MongoDB, Redis, Confluent, Kafka. So the issue is that if you've built an ops team and you've trained them to work with managed services, the licensing changes, and now you're suddenly forced to get the software from somewhere else, either from the owner of the database, which poses its own vendor lock-in risks, right? Or maybe you replace it and run it yourself, right? Which poses its own risks, right? For example, you need to find that rare talent to help you, build that sort of operational management and automation that you need, so that you can run it, right?
Yeah.
And then there are other things like data protection changes, infrastructure cost predictability. We all know cloud computing is complex. It is hard to predict, right? Because pricing models are opaque. AWS is pretty infamous for that. So trying to model your application growth, right, and how much that growth is going to cost. It is a hard thing to do. So we see a number of risks, and eventually, if you have budgets, right, all companies they operate on budgets. Just to keep the lights on, 90% of your budget disappears, right? So you have a small sliver of 10% that actually goes to new R&D and innovation, right? Mm. And being heavily committed to these either sort of proprietary vendors with high licensing costs, or these huge these huge, sort of vendors, that eats up all the budget. I mean, it end up, stifling your innovation.
And you've been in the heart of this space for some time now. So I'm curious, have you seen the entire landscape evolve over the years to enable organizations to get the convenience of cloud deployment models and unlock reliability and scalability and all those cool things without sacrificing the sovereignty wholesale?
At a high level, concepts, platforms, and tooling, they are evolving, right? And they're evolving to enable, organizations with enough will, right, to safely apply a cloud operating model, right, with less expense, right? So, that along with the sort of, general cost and, sort of opacity of the cloud infrastructure, it's causing organizations to rethink, right? So as we all, and also as we mentioned earlier, there's compliance with like the, GDPR in the EU. So, ultimately, we see organizations trying to accomplish, accomplish a few things, right? Firstly, there's the environment agnosticism, right, which means workload portability. Secondly, end user independence, right? Being able to access the infrastructure and the database so that you can actually fix things if needed, right? Yeah. And thirdly, open source available tool accessibility, right? And that's the operational software and tooling to help you run the database. But that doesn't mean, cloud services, as we know them, are going away, right? And, nor should they, right? It just means they will be considered as tools, right? And they will be implemented according to things like strategy, right? And not perceived convenience or efficiency. Just to give you an example, one of our customers, ABSA, formerly Barclays Africa, right? They are running a hybrid cloud environment with on-prem data centers, AWS and Azure, right? So they can deploy in any of these environments at will. They can move workloads as they wish, right? And actually, they have a compliance team that decides for each application where the data should be stored. So it's not something which is dictated by IT, right? Because the worst thing would be the IT said, well, we built everything on AWS and there you go, right? But, it's dictated by rather what the business needs, right? So today, they've passed over 2,000 database instances running in that hybrid environment, right? So they're doing this at scale. And, they are able to do this because the tooling exists today, right? We're not in 2010, right? We're in 2022, soon 2023, right? So everything from configuration management tools like Ansible, Chef Puppet, database automation platforms like ours, and even things like, white glove colocation services, right? So you don't have to buy, set up, and maintain your own servers, right? So, and that's not to mention the sort of maturation of concepts, right? So, such as the cloud operating model, which, historically it has been tightly tied to the, to the hyperscalers, and that's understandable, right? They built it. But this does not have to be the case anymore. Right. The public cloud is just one way to implement this cloud deployment model. And, sort of enterprises, sometimes they proudly say how they have a cloud first deployment model and how they just build everything on AWS, GCP or Azure. Right. But, it's like saying that you listen to radio music or to Spotify music, right? Rather than you're saying you're listening to music on the radio or via Spotify. Right. So radio, Spotify, AWS, GCP, Azure, these are the media, right, for which you access what you want. And obviously, some people might say, well, somebody like Barclays Africa, ABSA, right, it's a big bank with significant resources, right, which is why they were able to go hybrid with single pane of glass management, right? But we actually see smaller and smaller companies, doing this because, we have the tooling today for that.
And this space is moving so quickly at the moment, and you have to keep an eye on all the latest tech trends to see where it's heading and what might dominate 2023 and beyond. And as someone that's right in the heart of this space and you're following things closely, are there any particular tech trends that stand out or excite you at the moment?
Right. I've been in the database area for a long time, and I absolutely love it. But you might laugh, but I am an inexperienced homeowner. Like owning a house in Sweden, right? So any tech that helps achieve greater homeowner sovereignty is something that I find fascinating, right? So for instance, instead of relying entirely on the energy grid, right, being able to generate your own electricity using solar panels, right, being able to feed that power back to the house, or maybe charge your electric car with your own generated electricity, or even sell it back to the grid, right? So and things like using your car as a way to buffer electricity from the grid, right, in the middle of the night when when prices are low. Because that's the problem, right? I mean, there is enough electricity to go around. It's just that the grid can cope with the peaks we have in society, right? And as a society, we are extremely dependent on energy. We can see firsthand what happens when as a country or society, we become totally dependent on energy sources from certain countries, right, for our energy needs. So let's call it something like energy vendor lock-in, right? So we are in the middle of an energy crisis, but it also presents a massive opportunity for society, right? As we are recalibrating, to some more self-sustainable energy sources, right? So I hope I didn't disappoint you that it wasn't in the area of databases.
No, not at all. I love that. And as we're right at the beginning of a new year, what's your big focus going to be in 2023? I appreciate it's probably not too much you can share, but is there anything you can about what you're going to be focusing on?
Right. Well, we have spent, a huge amount of time in the last 12 months, synthesizing these concepts around, sort of sovereign, DBaaS into one coherent whole. So we are hoping to bring this sovereign DBaaS and all the related concepts into the large conversation, right? So we'll do this through activities like this and others like our own podcast. But I think we'll begin formalizing what the ecosystem will look like, right? Especially sovereign infrastructure tooling. And that includes configuration management tooling like Ansible Puppet, right? Middleware like OpenStack, VMware, cloud management tooling like Terraform, database automation platforms like ours, right? And of course, we will continue to build out our platform to ensure that people can sort of more readily implement the concepts.
Love that. And we started the podcast today talking about your origin story. And as we come full circle now, I'm going to ask you to look back upon your career, because none of us are able to achieve any amount of success without a little help along the way. So I'm curious, is there a particular person that you're grateful towards who may have invested a bit of time in you or saw something in you and helped you get where you are today that we can give a little thank you to? Is there anyone that you'd like to do that for?
Neil, I have moved around a lot. I've lived on 3 continents. I've met a lot of people that's been very helpful to me. I've learned a lot. But probably, if I had to single out one single person, it would be my dad, who, unfortunately, he isn't with us anymore. But when I think of him, I think of 3 things just come to my mind. Discipline, ethics, hard work. And I remember one thing he always used to tell me, do not owe people. Yeah. And, sometimes, somebody tells you something and it's in there at the back of your mind. You don't really think about it, but actually it changes how you do things. I mean, I would say, it defines even how we've built Severalnines. We worked for probably about 2 years without salary, right? We started earning some money. We used it to hire, right? And then we started getting customer revenue and, which kind of funded the growth. And that was 11 years ago. I mean, today we have more than 200 enterprise customers and we have a profitable business. We're always profitable every year and we keep growing, right? No VCs, no loans, right? So in a way, we are a sovereign business, right? We only answer to our customers and to our user community. And I think, probably those words from my dad, probably had it probably had something to do with that.
That's a beautiful answer. And before I let you go, for anybody listening wants to find out more information about anything that we talked about today, and we have covered a fair a fair amount of ground in a small amount of time. So what's the best way of finding out more information about Severalnines, contacting your team, contacting yourself, etc.? What's the best starting point for everything?
Right. So yeah, we have, the website obviously has tons of great resources, severalnines.com. And actually, severalnines.com/sovereign-DBaaS. That's for the sovereign DBaaS, concepts. We are on LinkedIn and Twitter, right? Severalnines on LinkedIn. Our Twitter handle is Severalnines as well. So we have tons of stuff online, and we'll be happy to talk more about them.
Well, there's so much I've loved chatting with you today. I think, like I said, we covered so much information there. And also, I think you brought it to life with your personal story, what put you on this path, and one of the big reasons that you're on this path in the first place. So just a big thank you for sitting down and sharing that with me today. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Neil.
I hope you enjoyed today's interview as much as I did. But a quick reminder that this podcast is brought to you by Flipper, the #1 marketplace to buy and sell online businesses and startups. So the question I'm going to ask you before I go is, do you own or run an online business? And have you ever considered selling your site, your store, your tech, or your app? Well, with world-class combined matching technology, dedicated brokers, and end-to-end services, all at the most efficient price, Flipper is making selling your online business simple. So to get a free valuation for your business, simply visit flipper.com/techtalks, where each month thousands of online business owners are exiting with Flipper. Again, to learn more, visit flipper.com/techtalks. So a huge thank you to today's guest for coming on. Remember, this show is not about me or even today's guest. It's about you too. And I want to hear your views, your experiences, your questions, pictures to come on the show, whatever it is. Just send me a quick email, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk, and you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, all the usual places. Just look for @NeilC.Hughes. But I'm afraid we've reached the end of another episode, so a big thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.